Hello again, this is Aaron, and I'm continuing our series on the 12 Days of Christmas with day 7, day 7 Swans a Swimming. So, good stuff. Alright, on the 7th day of Christmas, a true love gave to me 7 swans of swimming, which, again, my true love is God in the relation of this song to what it means. And so the 7 swans of swimming, this one's an unusual one because it relates to the gifts of the Holy Spirit, or in some cases just gifts period, but religious spiritual gifts regardless. So knowing what exactly they mean can be tricky because it seems like every denomination has a slightly different explanation of what these are. So the traditional, straight up Catholic version of this is, let me see here. Sorry, is wisdom, knowledge, counsel, fortitude, understanding, piety, and fear of the Lord. Now that isn't what I've seen in everything. One version I saw was prophecy, service, teaching, exhortation, giving, leading, and compassion. A number of those are very similar. And a version of it that I saw, that I was researching this in a different way, so it might not even be the same 7, but they were, although I'm pretty sure they are because they do seem very similar. Or wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, fear, and joy. Now, I can't do much with the second one because it's so different, but just understanding the differences is important too. These again are 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. The first version I mentioned is the Catholic version. That comes from Isaiah 11. The last one I wrote is from a Lutheran website, and that more references Revelation. The second is something I found that I've on a site I've been using to kind of summarize these things, but it doesn't give any sort of source. So I'm kind of look at the differences or the understanding of what these are and the differences. So I'll use the Catholic version as a base, and where it differs from the Lutheran version, I can get into that. But I think the Catholics actually list them in order on purpose, which for reasons I won't get into, but to understand some of it. And again, the idea that these are swans of swimming, as I've mentioned, the what the actual gift is doesn't always matter. And I think as we're hitting the end of them, I think it matters even less because this again is designed for children as a memory device, sort of, or a relational device. So you can say these things, and if you know what they stand for, you can remember what they stand for as part of a foundation of faith. So the trick is to not get centered too much on what that is. Anyway, wisdom is different from knowledge, which we'll see later, and that knowledge is generally things that are learned, and wisdom is things that are applied. Wisdom is experience. Wisdom is knowing how to, is just knowing how things will work, not how things should work. It's generally seen as a more important but less teachable version of intelligence. Although knowledge is great, wisdom will not help you create anything, but it will help you. It is what keeps you in the box, or helps you thrive inside of the box. Knowledge is what expands and takes you outside of the box. But that doesn't mean it's not important in any way. Using it to compare to knowledge, it almost sounds like I'm denigrating it. No. Wisdom, in my opinion, is probably more important. Because wisdom is what helps you maintain, in 99% of the time, that is what you need. There are times when you need to survive, and I'm thinking about just survival, not necessarily thriving, but there are times when you will need to think outside of the box and come out with something outrageous or incredible. That's where knowledge helps. Understanding is a filter. That's how we, and in the verse in Revelation, wisdom and understanding are tied together. All the first of the first six, there are groups of two. Excuse me. So, what understanding does is that's our filter. That's how we gain certitude. That's how we gain just the ability to have understanding, and that itself can be difficult because again, it can be considered a factor of intelligence. Although the teaching method can breach that tremendously. People of low intelligence do not have a certain level of understanding normally, so we have to explain things to them at a lesser level because that's the only way that they can understand. That's not meant as an insult. That's just the way you are. Intelligence is not something that we create. It's something you were born with. So, the third is counsel, which is kind of an extension of prudence. Idea of prudence is similar to discernment, but counsel is something that gets put into us that tells us how to act best in certain situations. And then the fourth category, which again in the Catholic version is fortitude, and the Lutheran version of this is might. It is interesting that these, a line from Isaiah and a line from Revelation, are so similar. Fortitude is the Catholic Church sees it is basically courage, but it goes beyond that. It's the ability to withstand the tests of time and the trials and tribulations of the world, to stand firm. And to compare that with might is interesting because in one aspect it kind of means the same thing. To be able to stand mighty and to defend an area, or to be able to withstand an assault is considered to be mighty. So that's great, but that isn't exactly how we see it anymore. Usually might is considered a more aggressive term, but I think they do mean very similar things. And again, counsel and might are considered in the same grouping in the Revelation verse. The fifth one is knowledge, which it is the ability again to kind of go beyond to create. Knowledge is creation. It's the ability to go beyond the basics and to evolve the world and to develop and to just do the sorts of things to create beauty, to give people something to hope for in many ways. That's knowledge. So the next category changes again. The Catholic Church is piety, which is a willingness to worship and serve God. And then their seventh is fear of the Lord, which is it's a gift of the Holy Spirit that gives us the desire not to offend God. But it's something that arises out of love. Now, to compare those last two to what the Lutheran one says, I think they use fear for both of those, and to mean the same things. To that fear gives us the desire to worship God, to serve Him out of love, to also not desire to offend Him, and through all of this having hope. That fear and hope are not opposites, that they actually work together. that that the fear that we have is a reverent fear. It is not a malevolent fear, and I think that's important. And then joy, though, is the last one. I think is just this is something that a word that I don't always see in Catholic circles, and it might be my personal perspective, but the idea of joy, of being able to move, to keep our eyes focused upon God and knowing that God is what brings us joy, and to even think of the difference between the word joy and happiness, is happiness being kind of I always consider it to be a momentary thing. It's in this moment I feel happy. Not have you been happy in your life? That yes, of course, at some point. But have you lived a life of joy? Have you been able to? Because what joy means to me is a positive fulfillment. That if somebody is joyous, they are fulfilled. They are not just at a higher level of happiness. Because I think you can say that within the word happy. I am extremely happy. But to say I am joyous is to imply a length of time. So, what do any of these have to do with gift giving? I would say on the 7th day of Christmas, it's probably better to use the date as an idea for gift giving because it's New Year's Eve. So, I would give somebody something that makes sense for New Year's Eve. Because again, in relation of these are gifts that God is giving us. These gifts to be able to do this. If you can use one of those gifts for someone, that's great. So, something that requires wisdom or knowledge or these sorts of things. But that isn't always going to be the case. If not, I would give something that kind of reflects the year. Like, this is what 2018 was. This is what it meant to me, to you. That sort of thing. So, okay. That is day 7. And so we'll get to day 8 here. 8 Maids of Milking, which is a completely different challenge. But again, thank you and have a great New Year.